In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the upcoming pattern. We do have back-to-back days of pretty major severe weather and some other storms and interesting temperature patterns to track here. We're not just going to be in a full-blown warm pattern anymore. It appears like there will be some cold shots from time to time. This will obviously cool things off and warm things up. We'll be back in a roller coaster temperature pattern. But on top of that, there's likely to be storms along those cold fronts that move through, and that should pick up the activity in the long range. So we're going to be discussing all of these things today. Let's just dive into things. And today's video, unlike yesterday's, is going to be coming out at a very decent time, so we can track later today's weather. And we do have some rainfall out west for the lower and coastal regions, lower elevation coastal regions, that is. Snowfall in those higher elevation areas of California, Nevada, and Oregon. We do have some severe weather across the northeast here. We see that there is an enhanced risk in here. We'll take a look at the Storm Prediction Center later on. There's some indication that there could be some large hail, tornadoes, and especially damaging wind seems to be the highest risk for today, with some of these major thunderstorms occurring across Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, and maybe even into southern New England. Let's move towards tomorrow on Monday, April 15th. And this looks quiet for the most part, although we do have a 990 over Colorado, bringing some snowfall and rainfall to the Rockies region here. Some isolated thunderstorms throughout regions of the United States, even the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic, the Ohio Valley, the kind of northern plains, southern plains, even the Northwest here. So many different areas dealing with precipitation, but don't get it twisted. There is major weather on the way for later this night on Monday, and that's going to occur across some of the southern plains. We will see severe weather develop, already kind of popping up by 11 p.m. here on Monday at the very end, and then by Tuesday at about 2 a.m., we're starting to see these supercells develop here to the south and east of this 991 low pressure system over western Nebraska. So especially southern Kansas, western Oklahoma, and then north central Texas seems to be the primary area to watch for these supercells. Could bring about tornado risks. Obviously, damaging wind and hail will be a factor, so definitely some impactful weather there overnight Monday into Tuesday. I hate these overnight threats because it's just so hard for people to be aware of what's going on when they're asleep. So I recommend a radio, some sort of something to where you can get warned. They have weather radios that will do that, so keep that in mind. I think those are great, especially if you live in these areas susceptible to tornadic activity. And then for the day on Tuesday, this is Tuesday afternoon on the 16th, we see this thunderstorm activity shifts eastward into portions of eastern Texas and Louisiana, eastern Oklahoma and Arkansas, eastern Kansas and Missouri, and then portions of Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, and potentially later on for some of those states to the east of here. This low has dropped off to a 989, which is very major, by the way. I always kind of use that kind of 980s and below as a major low pressure system. 990 is a very hefty one, and then, anything above, 1000 is going to be a weaker low pressure system, in my opinion. Of course, I've talked about over the past few days that, sometimes the pressure doesn't really indicate how strong the impacts will be. In this case, it does. We have a strong low pressure system and very impactful situation surrounding it. By Wednesday here, we also have a long range severe weather threat that we'll look at. And it's not really long range in terms of pattern, but as far as severe weather risks, it definitely is. And we'll take a look at that at the end of the video as well on that Storm Prediction Center outlook. But we do expect thunderstorms here throughout the Ohio Valley and into the deeper south for the day on Wednesday. We do see colder air moving into the west here, so it's really dropping down, and we even see some snowfall here for Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming as a result of this. And this low is really rapidly moving towards the northeast. It's now over Wisconsin as a 995. So again, now it's kind of hefty, not really major in my opinion. As we keep going towards Thursday, we see some of these thunderstorms reach the coast here, but this low has basically dissipated, but there could be some leftover isolated or scattered thunderstorms. This cold is dropping down even further. Clearly a ridge in the east pattern as we see this warmth really surging even up into Canada. But this is trying to develop a cold front on the eastern end of this cold air, and we see precipitation developing along it, so maybe another thunderstorm risk. I would kind of say that Missouri and Kansas would have the best chance of severe weather on this particular frame for Thursday on April 18th. And by the time we reach Friday on April 19th, again, no strong low pressure system really to work with, but we do have isolated and scattered thunderstorms on this kind of temperature boundary and out ahead of it. As this trough is now kind of centered over the plains, it's slowly shifting eastward. It was centered over the west. Now it's kind of rotated towards centered over the central states, and it's likely to be centered over the east eventually as it continues this kind of rotation. So we'll track this. Let's take a look at Saturday, and already it's starting to get centered over the east by this point, and we see warm air surging for the west. This is going to be one of the driving factors for this cold air really having to shift eastward. We see a lot of precipitation underneath this. Again, with the time of year in mind, late April, we can assume that a lot of this would be thunderstorm activity, especially here in the southern quadrant, but possibly for the northeast as well, and could even have some severe weather implications there as well. Sunday on the 21st, this all kind of reaches towards the southeast and deeper south as it's being forced further and further south by this cold air to the north. So definitely a cold front or stationary front, but it is kind of moving. So I would say it's likely more of a cold front. And this is likely to feature thunderstorms as this air to the south that it's moving into is very humid, very warm, and probably we're seeing a lot of instability in these areas, although this is pretty far out. Along the Rockies, we also have some precipitation in here, snowfall and rainfall depending on your elevation. Let's move this towards Monday the 22nd. Gets much quieter. I can pinpoint a couple of areas with some thunderstorms like the plains and the southeast here, but very quiet compared to what it was. We still have a major ridge over the west here and a very minor trough now by this point over the east. We can see it's a very flat jet stream here, slightly descending, but so nothing major. This ridge is obviously a lot more impactful or I would say more prominent than the trough in the east is. And even here by the 24th on Wednesday, I see signs that this ridge is trying to move eastward, just like we saw yesterday. So potentially ending off April with a much warmer pattern again. So we've been in a more consistently warm looking pattern. We're in it right now. We started warming up just a couple of days ago in the east here. And this looks to continue for about a week. So this will be a longer term warm pattern, but now on the back end we're seeing some signs of cooling, then warming, then cooling. However, we do see that this is maybe moving back in the direction of consistent warmth with the cold air moving down over the west. Only time will tell though. Let's check out the GFS model, see where we get agreement. I mean, we get these thunderstorms, looks a little bit more impactful here for the southern mid-Atlantic on this GFS model. 989 here. We continue to see these bad thunderstorms across the plains for Monday into Tuesday. Again, that kind of crosses the entire United States, bringing severe weather along the way. And then here's this cool down that comes in, and look at this perfect agreement. I mean, we're at hours 159, so almost 6 days out here, and we see really good agreement. I mean, we have the warmth surging up the west, a little bit less prominent than the European model, but it does shift that cold towards the east, and we do get kind of this really slow-moving cold front bringing thunderstorms. So almost the same look as the European model, which is what you like to see. And then we get this warming pattern. We get beyond 10 days here on the GFS model, and we really warm up after that point on this GFS model, kind of like what I predicted we're going to see from the European model. And as this warm air surges, we get a lot of activity in the plains again, so more severe weather on the way. I would say we're still in the above average column for the amount of severe weather that we're seeing, even though we're in this time of year. I feel like we're getting a lot more enhanced to moderate risk days than what's typical. But we haven't seen a lot of moderate to high days. So we've been getting a lot more of those mid-tier severe weather days. But thankfully, we've been spared from a majority of those high-end severe days so far. As we move towards Thursday here on the 25th, we see another 989 developing over Kansas, probably started in Colorado. So we're seeing a very similar pattern take place once again with a cold front, warm front look. And we would be watching for severe weather here underneath this warm front and along this cold front. So somewhere in here would be the corridor to watch for Thursday on the 25th. Keep in mind this is very far out though. But they have been doing a nice job of indicating these severe weather events in the long range. So I'm feeling semi-confident in this actually. It looks like we have a stretching cold front, but it gets a lot more minor by this point. More isolated and scattered about thunderstorms, still could feature some severe weather. The warm front is holding much of the precipitation along this storm, and that would mostly feature showers most likely, but time will tell on that one as well. And we kind of just stay in this warmer pattern in the east for quite a while after that kind of 20th time frame. Here's another 998 over the plains with a very, very strong corridor of potential severe weather across the plains and Midwest. So again, another major threat. This one's even further out. So this one, we're getting kind of into some sketchy territory as far as how far out this is. But the interesting thing about this one is it develops into a 979, and this cold front stretches all the way back through the plains. So we would be potentially looking at multiple states dealing with thunderstorms and severe weather, which we've seen quite a bit of that this season so far. So I would say this is pretty realistic, although the range makes me think that this is something we should more pay attention to the bigger picture. Keep in mind that this is something that is indicating to us that there looks to be favorable conditions for these types of storms to take place, but I wouldn't say that exactly on the 29th into the 30th, we're going to have a 979 near the Hudson Bay up in Canada. That doesn't really resonate with me as something that will stay true oftentimes. The date can change a little bit, the intensity, the location, but overall, seeing these lows forming in the plains and moving up into Canada consistently through the upcoming pattern, that is something that we can take away from this model and likely could hold true. Now, the total precipitation, we're seeing a lot less out west even versus yesterday's model runs. We're going to do a downgrade there. We're seeing more across the plains and eastern states. I would say we're in the slightly above average column in here. This isn't anything too crazy, but just a little bit more active than what's typical for most areas in here. Although it does vary a lot from county to county even here. We see some areas dealing with reds and then some areas dealing with gray. And that's the difference between 2 inches and under 1/10 of an inch. So within a very short distance. So keep in mind on a 10-day forecast when you're seeing something that specific, this is not going to hold true to that degree, obviously. Now, total snowfall, we're getting very near to not even needing to show this anymore. We have the mountainous west seeing some, but even the Cascades and the Sierra Nevada are looking at under a foot over the next 10 days. And, once we're into May, we're really going to be slowing down. The Rockies, the highest elevations of the Rockies here, like Jackson Hole up there in Wyoming into southern Montana, and then some of Colorado and Utah there, that's your highest elevations in the Rockies. They're holding on to some of those 1 to 2 foot amounts, but I suspect over the next 10 to 14 days, that's even going to slow down a lot here. Now, we're doing something different for the temperature forecast. This is your ECMWF, which is just the European model, but your AIFS, which is the European AI model, which is a brand new thing, and I wanted to use this because I'm experimenting with it. If it turns out to be better at forecasting these temperature patterns than the GFS model, we might actually stick with this long term. So I wanted to show this. The other good thing versus the European model with this is that it goes to 15 days, just like the GFS model. So instead of hours 240, we get all the way to like the 384 hours or whatever it is, which makes it a lot better for forecasting in the long range because it's actually trying to give us something at least. So let's move through with this. We get warmer temperatures in the east for a while, like I was mentioning. This starts to come to an end by kind of mid to late week. We see this frontal boundary by Thursday into Friday starting to move in. So this cold air is moving eastward here. It's pretty substantial as well. And then we have warmer temperatures now prevailing over the west. This is that positive PNA that's forcing the cold air eastward. And this warmth is going to be coming to an end and likely either dissipating or moving offshore, either way, away from the eastern states as this cold air forces it out. So let's watch this take place. Friday, we see it advance a lot, and then by Saturday, it's pretty much there. Sunday, it's for sure already here. Again, that's going to be Sunday into Monday, 21st into 22nd here. But we already see cold air starting to move back into the west, and I suspect this is going to force the warm air back into the east again, like a revolving door, and then the cold air is going to be forced out the same way the warmth was. So you can tell how this is a very progressive pattern, and this is exactly what I mean when I say that. It's just not sitting tight. It's just really, really rapidly moving through. And I know a lot of people probably have the misconception that that's always how it is. The weather's always changing, it's always moving, but it does vary a lot. Sometimes these ridges and troughs stay in place for 7 to 10 days, and sometimes they only last 1 or 2 days. So it can vary substantially, and this is a very quick moving one. So let's watch it take place. We see it's holding on for dear life by Tuesday, Wednesday, but this warmth is starting to move in. The cold is prevailing out west, and by Thursday, I would say we've already fully moved into a warm in the central and east states here, and then cold overall out west pattern. So that looks to be the case between the 20th and 25th. And then look at this. By Saturday, Sunday timeframe, 27th, 28th, we get cold air moving back into the eastern states again here. So this is looking to advance, probably has storms along it. So it's advancing in. This warm air is basically having to move out again. Then this warm air is already trying to move where that cold air is, because look at the west. Look at especially the northwest here. A negative PNA cold air mass is trying to establish itself on the west already. So another thing in meteorology is the larger these troughs and ridges are, let's say in the northern hemisphere, right? Because that's what we're talking about. Usually they move a lot slower. But if we get a lot of small ridges and troughs along the northern hemisphere all the way around the globe, they usually move a lot more progressively and quickly. And I can indicate 2 troughs and 2 ridges over just North America here. So yeah, that's probably why it's moving so fast. And it's going to create a lot of storms, because typically, as you know, when these cold air masses move into the warm air, we usually get storminess along it. Oftentimes we'll see a low develop on top of these cold fronts and move through. So this is going to bring a lot more activity, a lot more just crazy temperature roller coasters, and we could get really active if this is correct. But again, I'm kind of just experimenting with this model. I think that long term, this is going to become a very accurate model, because the AI is constantly going to be updating this model and trying to improve it. We should see it over time develop into a better model. But I'm curious to see, let's see if by the end of April we move into this very, very transitional pattern. Very curious to see. Now, the Storm Prediction Center day 1 here, we do have an enhanced risk, like I mentioned, in the northeast. Let's start in the west, though. General thunderstorms in the lighter green. We don't expect severe weather. It could happen, but really we just expect general thunderstorms to be possible. Same story in the light green here for the northeast. But we also have the darker green in there, which is going to be isolated severe weather reports. That's our level 1 risk area. The yellow being the level 2 risk area. It's called a slight risk. We expect scattered about severe weather in there. And then your orange from Ohio into a bit of West Virginia there and into Pennsylvania. We do expect a little bit more widespread severe weather to take place for the day today on Sunday, April 14th. Day 2 here, we end up basically seeing that threat move out, and we see another one developing over the plains, as again we have this low over Colorado, and we begin to see a lot more severe weather for the plains, especially overnight Monday into Tuesday. Don't expect this to be a noontime severe weather threat. It's likely going to be dark by the time these storms are firing up, but nevertheless, this goes through 6 a.m. Tuesday, so this is for the entire overnight threat as well. Again, the lighter green, general thunderstorms. Darker green is a level 1 marginal risk. Your yellow there is your level 2 slight risk. And then we have that orange once again for the second day in a row for Texas and Oklahoma there, where we expect a little bit more widespread activity. Day 3 will be the third day in a row with an enhanced risk, as we have, again, the lighter green, general thunderstorm risk, darker green, marginal risk, your yellow slight risk, and then that orange area, which is your enhanced risk once again, for areas like Iowa, Missouri, and Illinois. Now, like I mentioned, we do have one extended day risk, and that's going to be for Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, and Ohio there. It's pretty small, and it translates roughly to a slight risk area. I have seen these kind of become bigger as they move it over into the categorical outlook, which is only days 1 through 3, by the way. So this is day 4, so all we get from them is the percentage outlook, just since it's so far out. But again, this roughly translates to a slight risk. When they're larger, oftentimes you'll see an enhanced plopped in the middle there somewhere. I don't really know if that's going to happen with this one because it is a smaller area, but I would say expect at least a slight risk for a lot of these areas for the day on Wednesday, April 17th. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. That is it for this one. Be sure to subscribe, as we do upload every single day. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.